Hey guys, what's up? This is another video, kind of like what I did when I did the Who Held Up Better, the so-called pop punk early 2000s big three, or mid 2000s big three, where I talked about Paramore, Fall Out Boy, and Panic at the Disco, the three bands that all sort of at the same exact time just kind of came out of nowhere and became these big things and are still doing good things today. But today, there was a year where all of them released albums, and we had all thought one band or two of those bands were done, and one of them was just falling. And I'm talking about 2013, which I have called the return of the big three. Mainly the two bands that really weren't expected to come back. Fall Out Boy had been on hiatus for so long, I just think we all had kind of not forgotten about them, but we were at the point where they're like, maybe they're never just going to release anything again, maybe they are done. Who knows, maybe this indefinite hiatus is just permanent now. Like, we can't do anything about it. And Paramore, even though they had released the Singles Club EP in 2011, we weren't sure how long it was going to take them to make this so-called album and if it would actually happen. And then, there was Panic at the Disco, who just kind of tailed off a bit. I mean, their first two albums sold decently well. And then Vices and Virtues came out in 2011, and not a lot of people really batted an eye. It still sold 6th overall, or 7th overall, I think. But it was just, it's kind of one of their forgotten albums, like Pretty Odd. Yeah, it sold 7th, which is their second lowest, behind their debut album. But what makes this year unique was that this was only the second time ever where all three of those bands released an album in the same year, the only other year being 2005. But this year was special because the band started formatting into different sounds, and it was like we got to hear the band all over again, if you get what I mean, because they didn't sound the same as before. So I just thought it'd be interesting to go through what had happened, when the bands came back, how the albums did, and just kind of take it from there. So I'm going to start off with the band that actually came back first, and I'm not talking album-wise, I am talking single-wise. On January 22nd, 2013, Paramore returned with their single Now, and it did decent, I think. I would say, if I look here, it charted at number 13 on the US alt rock and number 16 on the US rock charts. It even charted at number 39 in the UK, and 86 in Australia. So it got in the top 20 in the US, and it was getting noticed, and I think people were getting excited because now we knew there was going to be an album, and it is a powerful track to start off. I mean, the music video of, this whole war taking place, it just seemed pretty cool. And then a month later, actually not even a month later, a couple weeks later, on February 4th of 2013, back came Fall Out Boy with the surprise. They just dropped it on us. I remember this day when it happened, and I just remember thinking to myself, holy shit, they're back. And my songs, Know What You Did in the Dark, Light 'Em Up, was the taste we got. And of course, finished number 13 in the US overall, number 7 and on alt rock and alt pop as well. So it was gaining, and number 2 in the US rock charts. So it was gaining success, and in the UK it got in the top 5 as well. People were just excited. They're back. They're not breaking up after all. Although it was a different sound, more electronic and more poppy than before, it was a great return song to kind of preview what would happen next. And then, Panic at the Disco still remained quiet. But on April 5th of 2013, Paramore released their self-titled album. Now, it was originally supposed to be out April 9th. It doesn't really say why they decided to push it up 4 extra days. I guess maybe it was threatened to be leaked at some point, and they ended up releasing it 4 days earlier than usual, and it got critically great reception. It's got an 81 out of 100 on Metacritic and nothing lower than 3 stars out of 5. It was the longest of the 3 albums going to mention, 17 tracks, 63 minutes, almost 64. You know, it felt like a show. It felt like a triumphant return for a band that we didn't even know was going to be around. I mean, the Farrell brothers left. Hayley Williams, Taylor York, and Jeremy Davis were left doing their thing. And like Fall Out Boy, there was a different sound to Paramore. Although that punk sound was still there on some songs, like maybe Say Fast in My Car and Ankle Biters. But the songs that, you know, became very popular were Ain't It Fun and Still Into You. And Still Into You is bubblegum pop. Well, Ain't It Fun is more... I don't want to say it is poppy, but it also is more alternative rock as well. It was interesting to hear, and once again though, it felt great listening to it. It was a feel-good album, and it really made you just, you know, want to get up and have fun, and it felt like you were experiencing the band all over again with a different sound. And then a week later, Fall Out Boy did its thing, and on April 12th of 2013 released Save Rock and Roll. Once again, upped 4 days beforehand. It was supposed to come out April 16th of 2013, but I guess it might have been the same problem that Paramore was having. Maybe their album was threatened to be leaked, and they had to bring it up. This is a 41-minute album. There later would be a second disc added, Pax AM Days, which was more pop-punky, short 13-minute thing. But, you know, a lot of people didn't really like this one that much. I mean, it had its high points, like The Phoenix, My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark, Let 'Em Up, Alone Together, Young Volcanoes. But the whole techno party anthem thing, I don't know, just didn't seem to work with other people, and myself included still to this day. It's my least favorite of their albums, but I was excited enough to buy the album, and I enjoyed it for a little while until I realized, you know, I knew they could do better, but it was just great to see them back in action, and, you know, it just kind of kept me on my heels that they were going to, at some point in time, come back. Now, as those two bands were getting things done and they announced that they were going to tour together, I think it was called the Monument Tour, I think it was what it was called, Fall Out Boy and, you know, and Paramore, you know, big comeback bands. Of course, they're going to tour together. Their albums came out within a week of each other, so it was exciting to see that. I wish I would have gone to that tour, but I had a lot of other things going on, so I really didn't. I wish I would have, because that would have been amazing. Did get to see Paramore live, but still waiting to my opportunity to see Fall Out Boy live. But 4 months passed. Well, not 4 months. I should say a couple months passed before Panic at the Disco started popping back up again. As July 15th of 2013, they released their single, Miss Jackson. And a lot of people once again started seeing change in the band. I feel like their first 3 albums are still different within each other. You know, you got the pop-punk, more emo leaning. I can never remember the name to the album. And then, of course, Fever You Can't Sweat Out. And then in 2008, they had the more Beatles, Beach Boys-esque Pretty Odd. And in 2011, Vices and Virtues, although kind of returned to that pop-punk form, still, you know, had more synth pop added to it, along with more just poppier elements. And once again, the singles weren't all that fantastic. They released a couple more singles beforehand. This is Gospel. And then on October 8th of 2013, not only did they release a single, Girls, Girls, Boys, but the album, Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die, hit stores. And this was the shortest of the 3 albums. This one was only 10 songs, 32 minutes, but Panic at the Disco albums, other than Pretty Odd, tend to be pretty short. This was the first to feature Dylan Weeks, as the first album was a 4-piece, and then Brendan Urie, Spencer Smith, or the first 2 albums, I should say, and then Brendan Urie, Spencer Smith, you know, did the thing as a duo, and Vices and Virtues, and Dylan Weeks was added to do bass guitar, backing vocals, keyboards, and all this other stuff for the band. And this one saw them go, I mean, of course, more pop, but also more electro pop, synth pop, dance pop. It was very different from anything from their first three albums at all, and it did better than Vices and Virtues, but there were still fans out there who were screaming foul, and I think out of the three, it was hard, because my favorite of the three from 2013 is still Paramore's self-titled at the best. And then if I had to rank which one I enjoy more between Panic at the Disco's and Fall Out Boys, it'd be Fall Out Boys and then Panic at the Disco. But nonetheless, how did these albums do? Well, Paramore's album spawned 7 singles. That's right, 7 singles of the 17 tracks. Those being off the top of my head, Ain't It Fun, Still Into You, Daydreaming Now, Grow Up, Ankle Biters, and Hate to See Your Heart Break. Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die had 4 singles, and that was Miss Jackson, This Is Gospel, Girls, Girls, Boys, and Nicotine. And Fall Out Boy, they had 5 singles with their album, that being My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark, Light 'Em Up, The Phoenix, Alone Together, Young Volcanoes, and Just One Yesterday. However, they were the only ones that made music videos for all of their songs. The 11 songs, they called it, oh god, what did they call it? I can't even remember what they called it. I'm trying to find it here. I think it was the Youngblood Chronicles is what they called it. They made like the music videos into, you know, stories of each other. It started with My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark, which was kind of like, you know, and then The Phoenix ended up being the prequel to that song, and it kept going on until you end up seeing them dying, going to heaven with Elton John at the end for the title track that finishes off the album. Paramore and Fall Out Boy's albums were both tied at number 1 in sales. I feel like because they came out in April and within a week of each other, they were kind of right there. Plus, the tour with each other probably helped. Obviously, they were into supporting each other, so that probably helped as well. And Panic at the Disco's actually finished number 2 behind those 2 albums. Had it come out around the time that the other 2 albums did, who knows, maybe we could have got a trio of bands for a tour that year. But, you know, Panic at the Disco's a little late to the party, so that's probably why theirs didn't get number 1. That was their highest selling, tied for their highest selling album at that point. As for which album's been more successful, I mean, I don't know. For Fall Out Boy, this album ended their hiatus, and it was their first album with new material in 5 years. Paramore's first album in 4 years, however, first with new material in 2 years as they released a Singles Club EP. And then Panic at the Disco, it was their first album in 2 years, but with the way Vices and Virtues did, not a lot of people knew if they were going to come back or not, and it ended up, Too Weird, Too Rare ended up selling better than Vices and Virtues. There was one top 10 hit for Fall Out Boy, and that was My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark. Paramore also scored a top 10 hit with Ain't It Fun, and Panic at the Disco, if I do remember, maybe had one. Let me go back here to their discography. Sorry, I'll edit some of this out, but yeah, they had one top 10 hit, and that was, of course, Miss Jackson, the first single, because it was like a comeback. That was the only one that hit the top 10. That was U.S. Alternative. So, yeah, I mean, in the end, they all at least had one top 10 hit. But I think the band that came out with the big win was Paramore, because they won their first Grammy. And other than Fall Out Boy, they're the only other ones of these 3 bands that have been nominated for a Grammy. I don't think Panic at the Disco has been nominated yet. You know, I know Fall Out Boy has, and this year was one of them. But Paramore's still the only one of the 3 to win one. And that was for Best Rock Song, Ain't It Fun. So basically, if it wasn't for this album, they would not have their Grammy. So, yeah, it's one of those things where you just look back at 2013 and seeing these 3 bands come back together all in the same year and within like a 4-month span, and especially 2 of them coming, you know, out with albums in back-to-back weeks of each other. It was just another, it was another just kind of, I think, great year for them, because like I said, 2005 when they all released albums, it was Fall Out Boy's second, their big hit. Panic at the Disco, their debut album, hit big in Paramore. No one really talked about them that much, but they did well beforehand, and, you know, this was only the second time, and still is only the second time, where they've released an album, all three of them in the same year. And this one just felt bigger because you knew who they were, but at the same time you also didn't, if you get my gist. They all changed their sound. They sounded new. They wanted you to make it feel like a whole new experience. And I mean, in the end, it did it. And that's really all I have to say. Is it's just, it was ecstatic for me when this year, especially 2013, because I remember I was going through a lot, and Panic at the Disco's and Fall Out Boy songs I felt like were a lot more happy-go-lucky albums, and even Fall Out Boys was, and it had that kind of feeling to it, but the story it told was cheesy but pretty cool, and it was just glad to see all those bands back up and running. So yeah, basically this is the video I wanted to make. 2013, the year the big three made a comeback and showed us all that they can still do it. They can still, get it when they can. So yeah. Tell me in the comments below, out of the 3 albums that came out that year, which one was your favorite? Which band were you expecting to make a comeback that year? Which one were you not sure about? Like, you were like, yeah, it could happen, but at the same time, I don't know. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you're on Facebook, share. And I will catch you guys next time.